The rain hadn't stopped all morning, and I remember thinking, as I gripped the steering wheel of my old Buick, that the sky looked exactly the way I felt inside. Grey, heavy, about to break open. My daughter had called me 40 minutes earlier. Not my daughter, really. My son's wife had called, Bridget, and the first words out of her mouth weren't even hello. Walter's in the ICU at St. Anne's. They don't know if he's going to make it. You can come if you feel up to the drive. If I feel up to the drive, my boy was lying in a hospital bed, and she was talking to me like she was inviting me to a church potluck I could skip if my knees were bothering me. I'm 71 years old. I raised that boy by myself after his father walked out when Walter was barely 4. I worked 2 jobs cleaning offices downtown so he could have new sneakers when the other kids teased him. I sold my mother's wedding ring to pay for his first semester at the community college. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, that would keep me from getting to him. So I drove, through the rain, through traffic, my hand shaking so badly I nearly missed the exit. The whole way there, I prayed the way you pray when you've forgotten how, just a desperate stream of please, please, please that didn't have any real words attached to it. St. Anne's is one of those big regional hospitals, all glass and chrome, the kind of place that's supposed to make you feel reassured, but only makes you feel small. I parked crooked. I didn't care. I half ran across that parking lot in the rain with my purse banging against my hip, and by the time I got to the front desk, I was soaked through and breathing like I'd run a mile. Walter Hadley, I told the young man at the desk. My son. He's in intensive care. He typed something, frowned at his screen, and told me the ICU was on the 4th floor, that I'd need to check in with the nurses' station up there. I didn't even wait for the elevator to finish its little chime before I was pushing through the doors. The 4th floor smelled like every hospital I've ever been in. Bleach and something underneath it, something sweet and sick that no amount of cleaning ever quite covers. The lights hummed. My wet shoes squeaked against the floor, and I followed the signs, room 412, room 414, my heart climbing higher into my throat with every step. And then a hand closed around my wrist. It was firm, the grip surprisingly strong, and before I could so much as gasp, a woman pulled me sideways into a little alcove by the supply room. She was maybe 45, in scrubs the colour of a robin's egg. Her hair pulled back tight, and her eyes, Lord, her eyes were the thing that stopped me. They weren't unkind, but they were urgent in a way that made my blood go still. "Don't go in yet," she whispered. "Please, trust me. Just wait here a minute and listen." "That's my son," I said, my voice cracking. I know who he is." She glanced down the hall, fast, like she was making sure no one had seen us. "I've been his nurse for 3 days. I need you to do exactly what I say. Stand here, don't make a sound, and listen." There was something about the way she said it. Not crazy, not cruel, just certain. The certainty of someone who knew something terrible and didn't have the time to explain it gently. I've lived long enough to know the difference between a person who's confused and a person who's frightened for you. She was the second kind, so I stood there, pressed against the cool tile wall in that little alcove, with the smell of antiseptic burning my nose and my own pulse pounding in my ears. And the nurse melted back into the hallway like she'd never been there at all. I didn't understand. I wanted to scream. My son was dying 20 feet away, and a stranger had told me to hide like a child playing some terrible game. But I waited. God help me, I waited. God help me, I waited. And less than a minute later, I heard them. 2 voices coming down the hall from the direction of Walter's room, and one of them I knew. Bridget. That smooth, satisfied voice of hers, the one she used at Thanksgiving when she'd correct me about how I'd cooked the same turkey for 50 years. The other voice was a man's. Older, smooth in a different way, the way a salesman is smooth. They stopped just on the other side of the alcove wall. They never saw me. Why would they look? Who notices an old woman standing in the shadows by a cart of bedpans? "How long do the doctors give him?" the man asked. "They keep saying it could go either way." Bridget's voice, calm as still water. "Honestly, the longer this drags on, the more it costs us. I need this resolved." Resolved. She was talking about my son's life, like it was a line item on a bill she wanted closed out. "The power of attorney is solid," the man said. "You're his wife. As long as he's incapacitated, you make the medical decisions. And once the paperwork on the house clears, that's in your name too. The accounts we can move quietly. Nobody questions a grieving widow moving money around. And his mother? There was a pause. I held my breath so hard my chest ached. What about her? The man asked. She's going to come sniffing around. She always does. The woman acts like Walter's still 7 years old. Bridget gave a small laugh, dry and humorless. She doesn't have a leg to stand on, legally, does she? Tell me she doesn't. Nothing, the man said. She's not on the deed. She's not on the accounts. She's not listed as next of kin. You are. Legally, the mother is a non-entity, a bystander. She has no rights to anything. A non-entity, a bystander. 71 years of my life, every sacrifice I ever made, and a man in an expensive suit had just summed me up in 2 words in a hospital hallway. The mother is a non-entity. I have never in my life wanted to put my hands around someone's throat the way I wanted to in that moment, but I stayed still. Something deeper than my rage held me in place. Some instinct older than anger told me to keep listening because the worst of it hadn't come yet. And it hadn't. Good, Bridget said. Then we keep things simple. The pills I've been giving him in his coffee at home did most of the work already. His heart's weak now. The doctors think it's the stress, the diet, the cholesterol. 48 years old, overweight, works too hard. Nobody's surprised. She lowered her voice, and I had to strain to catch it. Here it's even easier. When the nurses do their shift change, there's a window. I can adjust the line myself. Slow, natural. His heart just gives out one night, and that's that. The hallway tilted around me. I put my hand over my mouth. I think I would have screamed if I hadn't. I think I would have collapsed if the wall hadn't been there. The pills. In his coffee. At home. For how long? Months. She had been killing my son in his own kitchen, 1 cup at a time, while she smiled at me across the table and asked me to pass the cream. And the lawyer fee? The man asked, as casual as if they were discussing a car repair. You'll get your cut, generously. The minute the estate clears. A rustle of papers. Just have the transfer documents ready. I want this wrapped up before anyone starts asking questions. Before she does. She meant me. Before I started asking questions. The meddling old woman, the non-entity, the bystander. Their footsteps moved off down the hall toward the elevators, 2 pairs of shoes clicking away on the linoleum, while my whole world came apart in a supply alcove that smelled of bleach. I slid down the wall until I was crouched against the cold tile, my coat still dripping rainwater into a little puddle around my feet, and I pressed both hands against my mouth, and I did not make a sound. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Long enough that the puddle stopped spreading, long enough that my legs went numb beneath me. Walter. My Walter. My Walter, the boy who used to fall asleep in my lap during church, the man who, 3 years ago, had stopped calling me back, the son who'd grown distant and cold and short with me ever since he married that woman, who'd cancelled our lunches and forgotten my birthday 2 years running, who'd told me on the phone that I needed to stop smothering him. I'd cried over that. I'd lain awake nights wondering what I'd done wrong, why my own boy had turned to stone. And now I understood. It wasn't him. It was her, dripping poison in his ear the same way she dripped it in his coffee, turning him against the one person on this earth who would have died for him without a second thought. The supply room door opened. I flinched so hard I nearly cried out, but it was her, the nurse. She slipped in, crouched down in front of me, and took both my cold hands in her warm ones. Breathe, she said quietly. I know what you just heard. Breathe with me. Your son needs you to keep it together right now, and you can fall apart later, I promise you. But not now. How did you know? I managed. My voice didn't sound like my own. Her name tag read, Renata Voss, RN. She sat down right there on the floor beside me, didn't care about her clean scrubs, and she told me, I've been a nurse for 19 years, she said. I've seen a lot of dying, and something about your son didn't add up from the day he came in. His heart symptoms, the blood work, they pointed somewhere the doctors weren't looking. I pulled his old records. 6 months ago, his labs were perfect. Now his kidneys, his clotting, all of it's wrong in a way that doesn't happen from a bad diet. She paused. My mother died of what they called heart failure. Turned out my stepfather had been giving her something for the better part of a year. I was a teenager. I couldn't prove a thing back then. I swore I'd never look the other way again. She took a breath. I told the attending physician my suspicions yesterday. Dr. Okonkwo. He's a good man, he listened, and he ordered a full toxicology panel on the quiet. The results came back an hour ago. She looked at me, steady. Your son has a dangerous level of a blood thinner in his system, something he was never prescribed. We've already started flushing it. But I needed to catch her. I needed proof. So when I saw you running down that hall and I knew she was about to meet that lawyer of hers, I made a choice. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and pulled out her phone. And on the screen was a recording app. The timer still running, the little red dot pulsing. I got every word, she said. I started to cry then. Not loud. Just tears running down my face faster than I could wipe them. The relief and the horror and the gratitude all tangled up together. There's a security camera at the end of this hall, Renata went on. It covers the door to your son's room. Hospital security is already pulling the last 72 hours of footage every time she's gone in there alone. If she touched that IV line even once when she shouldn't have, we'll have it. Why didn't I record her myself, I whispered, half to her and half to nobody. I had my phone right in my purse. I just stood there. Stop. She squeezed my hands hard. You were in shock. You just learned your child is being murdered. Your hands were shaking too hard to even hold a phone. Do not for 1 second blame yourself for that. It doesn't matter. I got it. We got it. That's what matters. She helped me up. My knees screamed, but they held. Now listen to me carefully, she said, because the next part is on you, and it's the hardest thing I'm going to ask. The police are on their way, but they're 25 minutes out, and they need to come quietly with the right people, so she doesn't bolt and lawyer up before they get here. She has every legal right to walk out of this hospital right now if she wants to. We can't let her get spooked. So you are going to walk into that room and you are going to be exactly the woman she expects. The foolish, grieving mother who doesn't have a clue. You're going to hold her hand if you have to. Can you do that? Could I do that? Could I sit beside the woman who was murdering my son and smile at her? I thought about Walter falling asleep in church. I thought about him at 6, hands off the bicycle, shouting, "Mama, look, Mama, watch me." I thought about every single thing I had ever given up for that boy, and I realized there was nothing on God's earth I wouldn't do for him. Including this. I can do it, I said. And I meant it. Renata wiped my face with a paper towel from the cart, fixed my collar like I was her own mother, and walked me to the door of room 412. She gave my shoulder one squeeze. Then she disappeared down the hall to do her part. I went in. Walter looked so small in that bed. That's the thing that nearly broke me. My big, strong boy, grey as ash, tubes in his arms, a machine breathing numbers onto a screen above his head. His eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell, too shallow, too slow. And beside him, in a chair pulled close, holding his limp hand and gazing at him with an expression of perfect, practiced sorrow, sat Bridget. She looked up when I came in, and her whole face rearranged itself in an instant. The cold thing I'd heard in the hallway vanished, and in its place was the daughter-in-law I'd always known, the worried, weepy young wife. She even stood and crossed to me with her arms open. "Oh, thank God you're here," she breathed, and she wrapped her arms around me. I have hugged a lot of things in my life I didn't want to hug. A casket, a foreclosure notice. But I have never had to make my arms do anything as hard as holding that woman and not crushing her. I patted her back. I let her press her cheek to my wet shoulder. I smelled her perfume, expensive and floral, and underneath it, I swear, I could smell the lie. "What are they saying?" I asked, and I let my voice shake, which was easy, because it wanted to. "Is he going to be all right?" "They don't know." She drew me to the chair, sat me down beside the bed. "His heart, Margaret." She used my name like a weapon. Soft and intimate. "It's just so weak. They keep saying the next day or two are critical. I've been here all night. I haven't slept. I just keep praying." Praying. She kept praying. She kept praying. I looked at my son's grey face, and I held his cold hand, the same hand I held the day he was born. And I made myself nod along to every poisonous word out of her mouth. "You're such a good wife to him," I said, and I watched something flicker in her eyes. Pleasure. She liked hearing it. She thought she had me fooled, this old fool of a mother-in-law, and that more than anything almost made me lose my grip on the whole performance. We sat there. I asked the doctor's names, the medications, all the things a frantic mother asks. She answered smoothly, with that veneer of sorrow over the satisfaction underneath, and I watched the clock on the wall behind her head, the long hand crawling every minute and hour, knowing that somewhere in this building, men and women were moving toward this room, and all I had to do was keep her in that chair. After a while, I leaned forward and took her hand in both of mine, the way you do when you're about to say something heartfelt. She let me. Bridget, I said, I owe you an apology. Her eyebrows lifted. For what? For all these years. I've been distant. Cold, maybe. I know Walter and I haven't been close lately, and I always blamed it on him being busy, but the truth is, I think I was jealous. Of you. Of how he loves you. A mother doesn't like sharing her son. I let my eyes fill, which took no effort at all. Watching him lie there, I just keep thinking life's too short for all this foolish pride. If he pulls through this, I want us to be a real family. I want to do better by you. I watched the greed light up behind her sympathetic mask. I knew, the second I said it, exactly how to bait the trap. And I've got some money put away, I went on. Not a lot, but the kind of thing that could help you two get on your feet after. A bigger house, maybe. Whatever you needed. I'd want you to have it. Your family. Oh, she liked that. She liked that very much. Her hand tightened on mine, warm and false. That means so much to me, Margaret, she said, eyes glistening on cue. It really does. Walter would be so happy to hear you say that. Walter would be dead if she had her way, and unable to hear anything at all. But I smiled. I smiled until my face ached. We talked about nothing. Grandchildren we'd supposedly have one day, the house she supposedly wanted. I built her a future out of lies, the same way she built one for me, and I kept one eye on that clock the whole time. And then I heard it. Footsteps in the hall. More than two pairs. Purposeful. Bridget heard it too. Her head came up, her body went tense. That animal instinct that tells a predator the wind has changed. What's that? She said. The door opened. Two uniformed officers came in first, then a woman in a charcoal blazer with a badge clipped to her belt, then Renata, then a tall doctor I took to be Dr. Okonkwo. The room, big as it was, suddenly felt very small. Bridget rose out of her chair. Can I help you? My husband is very ill. This is a private. Bridget Hadley. The woman in the blazer didn't raise her voice. I'm Detective Marisol Cardenas. I need you to come with me and answer some questions regarding your husband's medical condition. Questions? The mask was still up, but I could see the cracks running through it. What questions? He had a heart attack. He's been working himself to death. The doctors all said, your husband has a controlled anticoagulant in his bloodstream that no physician prescribed, Dr. Okonkwo said quietly, at a level intended to kill him. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. That's insane, Bridget said, and now her voice had lost its silk. There's been a mistake. A pharmacy error. These things happen. You can't possibly think I. Renata stepped forward, and without a word, she pressed play. Bridget's own voice filled the room. The pills I'd been giving him in his coffee at home did most of the work already. Here it's even easier. His heart just gives out one night, and that's that. I watched the colour drain out of her face the way water drains out of a tub. I watched her look at the phone, then at the detective, then at the door, calculating, the gears spinning behind her eyes, looking for a way out and finding none. And then she looked at me. You, she said, and the silk was gone completely now, and what was underneath it was something I'll see in my dreams for the rest of my life. You meddling old it was you. You couldn't just stay out of it. You could never just leave us alone. I stood up. My knees didn't shake anymore. I looked that woman dead in the eye, and I'll tell you, after 71 years of being talked over and looked past and called a non-entity, my voice came out steadier than it ever had in my life. I'm his mother, I said. I have been his mother since before you were anything but a stranger looking for a mark, and a mother does not look away, not ever. You thought I was nothing. You were the one who was nothing all along. The detective read her rights as the officers turned her around, and the cuffs went on with a sound like a lock sliding home. She didn't cry. Women like her don't cry over anything but themselves. She just stared at me with pure venom as they walked her toward the door, and right before they took her through it, she hissed, "He'll never believe you. When he wakes up, he'll take my side. He always takes my side." "He's going to wake up," I said, "and it won't matter what he believes. The law doesn't run on his opinion, it runs on the truth, and the truth has you now." They took her out. Her heels clicked away down the hall, fainter and fainter, until I couldn't hear them anymore, and then I sat back down hard in the chair beside my son and started to shake all over, every bit of the strength I'd borrowed for the last half hour, draining straight out of me at once. Renata caught my shoulders before I tipped over. It wasn't over, of course. Nothing's ever as clean as you want it to be. Walter spent 2 more days unconscious while they cleared the poison out of his blood. 2 days. I sat by that bed and held his cold hand and talked to him about everything and nothing, about the bicycle and the church pews and the offices I used to clean at night so he could have his sneakers. Renata brought me coffee and a blanket and sat with me on her breaks. Dr. Okonkwo came by every few hours and showed me numbers on a chart that meant nothing to me, except that they were moving the right direction. Detective Cardenas came too. She told me Bridget wasn't even Bridget. Her name was Tamsin Vale, and Walter wasn't her first husband or her second. There'd been a man in Ohio who'd lost his house and his savings before he caught on and ran. A widower in Arizona who hadn't been so lucky, whose death 3 years back was now being reopened. My son was the third we knew of, maybe more. She married money, drained it, and moved on, and the men who survived were too ashamed or too broke to chase her. "She made a mistake this time," the detective said. "She got greedy, and she got slow, and your son had a nurse who paid attention." She looked at me, and a mother who showed up. On the third morning, with the sun coming grey through the window, Walter's fingers moved in mine. Not a twitch, a squeeze. I called for Renata so loud they probably heard me 3 floors down. His eyes opened slow like they weighed 100 pounds each, and they wandered, lost until they found my face, and he said one word, hoarse and cracked and barely there, "Mom." I put my head down on his chest, and I wept like I hadn't wept since the day his father left. Except this time it wasn't grief, it was the other thing. The thing that doesn't have a good name. The feeling of getting back something you were sure you'd lost forever. I had to tell him. Later, when he was stronger, when he could hold a cup of water on his own, I sat beside him and I told him all of it. The hallway, the coffee, the pills, the man in the suit, the other wives in the other states. I watched my son's face crumble, watched him go through the disbelief and the denial, and finally the terrible, dawning understanding, the same road I'd walked in, that supply alcove. "She made my coffee every morning," he whispered. "Every single morning. She'd bring it to me in bed. I know, baby, and I pushed you away. For her, I said those awful things to you, His voice broke clean in half. "Mom, how do you even look at me?" I took his face in my hands, that dear grey face with the colour just starting to come back into it, and I made him look at me. "Because you're my son," I said, "because I have loved you since before you drew your first breath, and I will love you after I draw my last. There is no version of you, no mistake you could ever make that would change that. That's not how mothers work. She used your love against you. That's her sin, not yours." He cried in my arms like a little boy, and I held him like one. And somewhere in there, the 3 lost years burned away to nothing. It's been a little over a year now. Tamsin Vale, the woman I knew as Bridget, took a plea rather than face a jury with that recording playing in open court. Attempted murder, fraud, and they reopened the Arizona case besides. 30 years. She'll be an old woman herself by the time she walks out, if she ever does. And I find I don't think about her much anymore. She took up too many years of my family's life already. I won't give her my old age too. Walter recovered all the way. We sold the house he'd shared with her, that house full of poisoned mornings, and he moved into a little place across town with good light and a kitchen where he makes his own coffee now, every cup of it, and I've never once seen him take it from anyone else's hands. He comes for Sunday dinner every week. We cook together. He's learning to make my mother's pot roast, the one I made for him on every birthday of his childhood, and he burns it about half the time, and we laugh about it. And that laughter is the sweetest sound I know. Renata Voss and I are friends now, real friends. She comes to those Sunday dinners more often than not. She told me once that her own mother would have liked me, and I told her that her mother raised a girl who saved my son's life. So I already loved a woman I never met. We both cried into the pot roast over that one. I started speaking too, at senior centres, at churches, anywhere they'll have me. I tell women my age what I learned the hard way, that being old does not mean being powerless, that being underestimated can be a weapon if you're brave enough to pick it up, that a mother's instinct is not foolishness, and a mother's love is not something to be ashamed of, that when somebody tells you you're nothing, you do not have to believe them. I spend most of my life being invisible. The woman cleaned the office after everyone went home. The mother-in-law washing dishes in the kitchen while the family laughed in the other room. The non-entity, the bystander. But I was standing right there in that hallway when it mattered most. And I was not nothing. I'm 71 years old. I gave my whole life to other people, quietly, the way women like me are taught to. And the day I finally learned to fight, I fought for the one thing that was always worth it. I won. We won, and my boy makes his own coffee now. I've had a year now to sit with what happened in that hallway, and the thing I keep circling back to is how close it all came to going the other way. If Renata had looked the other way, the way most tired people do at the end of a long shift, my son would be in the ground. If I had let my rage win in that supply closet and gone charging into the room screaming, Bridget would have lawyered up and walked, and Walter would have died a natural death 3 days later. Every good thing that came out of that day came because someone chose to do the harder, quieter, right thing in a moment when nobody would have blamed them for doing nothing. That's the part nobody tells you about being decent. It almost never looks heroic in the moment. It looks like a nurse pulling old lab results she wasn't asked to pull. It looks like an old woman swallowing the worst news of her life and holding a murderer's hand and smiling, because smiling was what would save her boy. The right thing is usually the inconvenient thing, the frightening thing, the thing that cost you something. Renata risked her whole career on a hunch. I risked my heart breaking in half right there on the floor. We did it anyway. That's the only kind of goodness that ever actually matters, the kind that costs. But being good wasn't enough on its own, and I want to be honest about that. If I'd only been good, I'd have been a victim. What saved Walter was that I got smart in a hurry. I learned to read Bridget the way she'd been reading me for 7 years. I baited a trap with the very thing she wanted most, money, and watched her walk right into it. There's a kind of clear-eyed thinking that comes over you when someone you love is in danger, and I tell anyone my age, do not let the world convince you that your mind goes soft just because your hair goes grey. Mine was never sharper than the day it mattered. And then there's the last thing, the hardest thing, the thing I didn't know I had until I needed it. The sheer stubborn will to stand back up. I was 71 years old and exhausted and terrified, and I made my knees hold me when they wanted to give out, because quitting was a luxury my son couldn't afford. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you'll find at the bottom of the well when there's no other way out. Bridget called me a non-entity, a bystander, nothing. And the truth she never understood is that the quiet people, the overlooked ones, the mothers washing dishes in the back kitchen, we are the ones paying attention. We see everything. And when the moment finally comes that the world needs us to stand up, we are exactly the ones still standing. I gave my whole life away for free. The day I learned to fight for it, I got everything back.